Cheers to that.
Salute. All right, we got my guy, Mike. If you would, introduce yourself to the camera.
What up, y'all? Mike, also known as Mike Fridge, Mike 303,
Hell yeah.
AKA Mike Martis.
So what we try to do on this podcast is talk to creative people about their journey, where it started, some of the ups and downs they went through, and what they're doing present day. So where are you from originally?
I am from here, from Denver, from West Side.
Okay.
Yeah, I went to school in Lakewood.
Yeah.
Grew up in Westminster.
What was it like growing up in Denver? I presume in like the late 90s, early 2000s?
Yeah. You know, it was, I think, you know, we talked before. I think it was kind of typical of the time, which I think a lot of kids at the time thought was specific to them. But then now that all these things are coming back and getting big again, it turns out like everybody was kind of into that stuff then. And like that counterculture was so big. So, you know, skateboarding and hip hop and punk rock and was very.
Vans Warped Tour.
The Warped Tour, you know, and those, you know, even when the Warped Tour was huge, we were like, this is still our thing, you know?
Yeah.
But.
Well, I mean, just speaking on the Warped Tour for a minute, they did a really good job of maintaining underground essence, right? Like they booked a lot of dope underground things everywhere. And so it wasn't like these super festivals or tours now where it's like 1,000 headliners that, you know, it was like grimy. That's what I remember the Warped Tour being, was grimy.
Oh man, right? You know, with the 105 and you're just like jockeying for shade. Yeah. And water with all the other
you'd be
civilians.
Out there, you'd be out there doing whatever with some of the headliners. Like they were just as in the mix as everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's get back to you, Westminster and counterculture. So what was that like being from the counterculture in Westminster in the mid 90s?
It was wild. It was fun, you know. I mean, you know, it was all about skateboarding for us. So I think growing up, it was just about skateboarding, and it was about finding new spots and finding people to skate with, and you know, and then you know, then comes like starting bands and doing stuff like that. And
with bands, what genres of music did you mess with?
When I was younger, it was all punk rock. You know, we were all little punk rockers, and you know, that was the genre that
influenced by like the circle jerks.
Influence, I think, like you know, starting with like old school stuff, like you know, GBH, Circle Jerks, Subhumans, Misfits, Exploited, you know, stuff like that. And then, you know, when I got into high school, it turns out more of like that's when the Fat Records came out with like all their big bands, and Epitaph signed all those big bands, and you know, and it was like.
I remember when Epitaph signed Rhymesayers. That was crazy.
Right?
Like they helped them
branch out,
level up to where they are presently.
Yeah.
And it kind of merged that gap of like, I mean, hip hop and punk had always had a synergy together.
Right. Thanks
but
to
that
like
was another example of that.
411 and you know, I think that's cool. We had talked about how, you know, all of that blended together, and like hip hop and punk rock, especially new school punk rock, was, you know, that was the soundtrack for the hoodlum years, you know.
So a lot of mosh pits.
A lot of mosh pits.
A lot of fights.
You know, there was a lot of fights.
I feel like at one point we had talked about you had kind of parlayed your let's just say interest in bar, street, party fighting into training.
Well, I think we talked about how, like, when, you know, you start training to fight, you find out how easy it is to get your ass kicked.
Sure.
Because, like, every dude in that gym can just fucking murder you.
You think that you know how to fight?
Anyway, I think anybody that goes into a gym with no formal training knows how quickly you get humbled, you know?
And how, like, when you did start going to a gym, how did that experience inform the discipline of skateboarding, of the bands, of your creative journey?
I mean, I actually didn't start training till later. Like, I did the taekwondo thing
Yeah.
in the, you know, when you're a kid and
Yeah.
the fucking,
That's still that's still a
all the
discipline.
katas and shit. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, geez, it's something like a million things I was thinking of on the way here that I wish I would have stuck with, you know? And I think like if I'm ever going to give advice to people that are younger than me, it's just like, stick with it. You know, because there's a
Yeah.
million things that like I think of now that if I would have stuck with, it would have been big. Like
Well, I think part of the struggle being from this place that we're all from, you know, America, Colorado, planet Earth,
right.
is we're hit with so much all the time. It's
Yeah.
sometimes challenging to stick with things because your curiosity runs as rampant as the things coming at you. So you might have an interest in Taekwondo, and that might lead to you skateboarding, then lead to you becoming a violinist, and lead to like it's so hard. There's so many distractions that it's like our culture is not one that's designed for locking into disciplines.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the more that, you know, we get into the social media pushing things, like it's just gonna get
more
it's gonna
fragmented.
be, yeah, it's gonna be like exponentially more detached.
Sure.
And harder to connect, and you know what I mean?
Well, and just like the quality of effort will go down because the discipline isn't there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's all lacking discipline.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line of that, you know?
Yep.
And I think that's a metaphor for a lot of things.
Right.
But so, yeah, so that's kind of like would be a metaphor for my advice as well.
Your journey.
Stick with it, man.
Stick with it. So you're doing some bands. You're skateboarding. You end up going to college. Where'd you go to college?
So I had a weird kind of, that's another like stick with it thing. I had a weird kind of journey because out of high school, I wanted to go to culinary school, but I was a vegetarian. And then they were like, you don't have to eat meat. You have to cook meat. And I was like, I can cook meat. And then they were like, you got to eat meat. And I was like, get fucked, you know?
Yeah.
So I, the punk rock kind of little kid in me was like, fuck this, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You know, and then I got a computer science degree. And that's when like that .com bubble burst and fucking, there was no jobs to be had. Mm-hmm. Another thing I would have stuck with, we probably have a couple houses by now, you know what I mean? It's like, hey. And then, I took some time off, tried to snowboard for a while. That one I did pursue. Yeah. You know, I gave it everything I had. I broke my back twice in the same season.
Yeah.
And I was trying to get sponsored that year, and that was the end of that. Came back here.
How long did you snowboard?
Well, I lived up there for like 2 years.
Okay, up there where?
In Keystone.
In Keystone?
Yep. Yeah. Shout out Tenderfoot. Yeah, I actually turned 21 up there. Yeah, at the GOAT. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I came down here. Yeah, my 21st birthday was with my homies in Boulder at the Dark Horse, though. So that's some Colorado shit.
Good old Dark Horse.
Shout out Welter, Ryan Welter.
Love that place.
His dad built that place. I heard they turned it down, but I'm still there so far. So
no, me and my wife were just there.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things that you hear and you're like, everybody's like freaking out about it.
I think they might relocate it. We asked them. I can't remember what they said, but it's not going anywhere. It might end up in a new building or something. But Dark Horse is an institution. It's there.
Yeah, right. It's been there for so long. It's funny because my dad grew up in Boulder. My dad was born in Boulder, and going back to the hill with him, he's like, having memories. The sink was still here, and we used to get drunk in the sink. Like,
now.
It's he hates it because. So yeah, that's like a weird thing. So I went back to school. I went to Front Range, with the intention of going somewhere, and transferred to CU in Boulder, and went there for psychology, and yeah, I thought my dad was gonna be so proud. He's like, I hate that city.
So you were ex aspiring snowboarder, skater, punk rock kid that decided to go to college.
I'm like, how do you're taking a major, you're like, how do you parlay being a hoodlum into a career? So
what is it?
I'm like, a lot of my friends went to like residential places and shit. A couple of my friends growing up, and when they had crisis and things like that. So I was like, damn, I could see myself doing that and
talking to people and helping.
Talking to kids, dude. Yeah. I only work with kids. I'm like adults are too far gone, bro.
Where did that psych degree take you? Like, what was the first?
Well, the first job I had was Tennyson Center, which was right over on the west side, like 29th and Tennyson, and that's like residential kids that get taken from foster care.
What
and shit.
year?
That was '08. That's when I graduated college.
The year is important because Tennyson in 08 is different than Tennyson right now.
Oh yeah, it wasn't like it wasn't like the
that was
fancy
just the north side.
It was just the north side, dude.
And it was a little heavier, a little more crazy. The kids that were in there were probably going through.
I mean, the kids that are in there will always be the worst case scenario because they're if you're taken out of foster care, that's pretty heavy.
Yep.
And so that was like a kind of trial by fire and baptism by fire kind of thing. And that even I think mental health, especially adolescent mental health, is a different place now, and I feel bad, because they're just drowning, and it's only getting worse. I don't know if I think we talked about how I was kind of flirting with the fact of maybe going back and doing that part time now that the tattoo stuff's all set up, and but that's where I started, and I went to a top preschool on the west side over there for a little while.
Yeah.
And that was like actual west side, like 10th and Sheridan, and because everything north of Colfax is the north side.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. All right. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, then I worked my way up to Children's Hospital over at Anschutz campus and did inpatient psych there for 8-9 years.
What was that like?
Well, compared to Tennyson Center, it was a walk in the park. It's like when I got there, it was like, wow, we only have to have, the max is like 4 or 5 patients. And over there I had 11. Wow. So it was like
overwhelmed, overloaded.
And there's the fact of being able to give kids like that attention, it really like sparked that in me, I think. Something that I was really good at. And I loved it for years. I still see some old patients sometimes, and
you can tell when you talk about it, there's like a twinkle in your eye, or like
little change. I think there's also a certain amount of goosebumps and anxiety that comes with it. Just the recollection of it. Just I don't think just from like the traumatic part of it, but I think it's also from how I view it of something that was like important that I made a difference in doing, and then it was like, how do you balance that with your own mental health and like how much you were able to give,
Well, it's like first-hand life experience, like helping someone change their tire, or mowing someone's lawn, or whatever. Those things are nice, and you should do that. Help people. It's the way that we should all be.
Right.
That's different than making a career out of working with at-risk troubled youth that are at the most difficult time in their life.
Yeah.
It's a different thing.
Yeah.
And someone that devotes themselves or dedicates themselves to that kind of thing for any amount of time will have experienced a level of grace and gratitude that most people will never even see, because most people only have the, oh yeah, I can change your tire experience, right? They've never like been in the trenches with people that lost their parents, were molested, beat, and you're just trying to help them eat food to sustain themselves because they're going through so many emotional and traumatic things.
Yeah. Yep.
And me, I've talked about it a bunch. I was in and out of facilities for most of my childhood, and so I was in those places, right? Like I was locked up in juvenile facilities where dudes were getting beat and raped in the facilities, and they were coming from homes where same thing. You show up to, like, let's just say a foster home that is state appointed, that they're paying the people to take random foster kids.
Yeah,
they have every cupboard locked. These kids are on this tight schedule, and then most often the people are a little left to center or right to center. They're a little off. They're not clicking normal. And these kids are going into that, and it's a crazy world. And then you take all of the trauma, let's just say a kid that goes through foster care, then goes through the juvenile facility, then ends up back in foster care, and then ends up with you guys. They've already done with so much shit,
Yeah. Yeah, for real. And that's why I say, Tennyson was the trial by fire kind of thing, the baptism by fire, because, the majority of kids that were at Children's were typical depression, anger, issues, you know, which is, you know, I would never trivialize somebody's trauma or their, you know, but there was a difference. And I think you just explained it very well. That system is fucked. It will always be fucked here in this country, at least.
It's just the world's hard and people.
I mean, I
go
think
through it.
there's people in the world that are trying things that are working, and I think that we know what doesn't work and we do it anyway.
What I can, you know,
We're a money-driven system.
the bit of grace that I can speak on, and everybody, the depth of people suffering ranges widely. But I can say
Right.
that the hard things that I went through, the tough things, are what made me, right? That's where the grit comes from. That's where the hustle comes from.
Hell
That's where
yeah.
the personality comes from, the character comes from. And, you know, we're all going to go through stuff. And granted, our parents don't want us to suffer, at least most of the time.
Right.
But we do. And that suffering is what contextualizes our life. So, you know,
Right.
in often cases, people can pull themselves out. Now that's not always the case. Like I know a lot of people that their life just is what it is and it's hard for them. But
Yeah, I mean, you know, some people were dealt some fucking shitty hands, but
Yeah.
you know, that's also the beginning of a lot of best success stories kind of thing.
Mhm.
But I think, you know, I think pulling yourself out is a process. You know what I mean? Like there's gonna be times where you're like, damn, I reached this part of my life. Like I got here and I'm proud of myself. It doesn't mean that, you know, you can't get pulled the fuck back down. So
yeah.
and that's the thing to learn, like it's
Life
hard.
is that.
That's it, you
I
know?
mean, I know everybody hates Kanye or whatever. He has this line where it's like, you get so high when you fall, it feel like a plane crash. And that's the
Right.
thing, right? Like success also can lead to fucking
Yeah.
crazy mental health issues.
You know, Kanye, for all the you know obscure, like all the ridiculousness that he puts out, like there's some gems of fucking genius. You
There's
know,
some stuff in there.
there's, you know, that video, the one video where that chick basically like takes him in the back of they're at a party and she takes him, Kanye, in the back and he don't even know what's happening.
Yeah.
And then he goes in the bathroom and there's he has to like cut that little guy out. You ever seen that shit? If you see that shit, it's, you know, it's like heavy. There's like a metaphor there.
Huh.
And it's fucking wild.
Crazy.
I'm not giving him any excuses, but
Back to the children's hospital. So you were there for 9 years, and you're you know, from what I know about you and where we intersected is you kind of parlayed in the bar industry as well as a bartender, bar back.
Yeah.
And while working in children's or while working in psychiatric world, you also worked in the night industry periodically.
I was retired by then from the bar life, but not the bar life obviously, but like the bar scene. You know, I didn't work in bar because I worked in bars when I was in college.
Sure.
So,
but then that lent itself to you being part of that culture and
yeah, you know, it's crazy. I think, you know,
because there's a camaraderie that comes from that too.
There is. I you know, it was weird coming back from snowboarding, you know, and that's when I started working in the bars because my homies down here worked in bars, but they were all still kind of like that rock and roll punk rock kind of life. And I worked in like those, you know, the clubs, you know, so they would never see me, you know, and that's where you give up your weekends and stuff for that. Like whatever they're doing, you're in the bar because that's when you make your money.
Yeah, that's when you got to.
And that kind of was a weird path of my friends and I, because you know, it's like the thing that it's like, oh, I hated it, and
you hated it while
you hated it. Like I'm
out.
sitting there the first night working in a bar, and I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? Like,
But then
I was just a snowboarder.
You think back on it now,
and well, you know, and then you make. I think I walked with a lot of money the first night I worked in the bar, and you're like, oh shit, I'll fucking see you tomorrow, and then that's it. Then you're hooked because you got money the next day. You know, and it's weird to think about like how that transition is. Oh, I hate these club people, these fancy fuckers, and then they're paying your fucking tuition and your rent, you know? So it's like you become homies and it's weird.
I was working in the oil and gas industry for a long time.
Okay.
Making 6 figures.
Yeah.
The boss.
Wow.
And I hated the separation. You know, I toured all over the world rapping, all that kind of shit. And
hell yeah.
On the rig, I was isolated. I was just there for 2 weeks and it felt like the world was moving without me. So I hated that.
Yeah.
And at a point, my mental health started suffering from that. And so I walked away from the gig of making 6 figures, security, insurance, all that. and I just jumped into the bar scene. And it didn't happen overnight, but once I got stable in the roles that I took on, even well before I became general manager, telly of all the clubs, all that kind of shit. When I was just a bar back, I was easily making 6 figures.
Yeah.
As a bar back.
Right.
Like you don't make shit on paper, but there are
right.
You know, through tips and just hard work, there are ways to do well.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be funny to think like, you know, how much money I was making at like the height of my bartending, because that's probably still some of the best money I've ever made, you know?
Yeah.
And I would go back and visit those dudes after college, you know, and I'm making not any money, and they're like telling me like, oh, we're going to college, we're doing this. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Stay here. I'll trade you right now. You got a house and a boat, like,
right now.
I'm like, I'm doing some good shit, but like, yeah, that's a balance, you know. I mean, like, you know better than anyone. It doesn't matter how much money it is if it's fucking making you crazy.
It's true. So your bar scene, and then your hospital, and you get to experience these kids and help them through some of their problems, which probably helped you through some of your problems.
You know, I think it's hard to say, you know, because I think I went in with so much shit that I hadn't processed, and some shit I still probably haven't processed, you know?
I think, but some of that trial by fire,
it definitely,
you're learning in real time, and you're also like, you're growing, and that's helping you, you know?
Yeah,
because
I mean, you know, growth is the change is the constant. Mm-hmm. You know, you can either grow or you can get worse, but you're never going to stay the same.
Yep.
You know what I mean, kind of thing. That's just kind of how I look at it, and there, you know, it's like anything else. There was times where I felt so fucking good about what I did and how, you know, all the positive things, and then there were some times that I couldn't take the negative side of it. Mm-hmm. You know, like I lost a couple patients, and in the worst ways sometimes, you know, and it's something you'll never forget, and blah blah.
Yeah, it's rough.
But, and then I think that going on, you know, the constant is change, and it's kind of, you know, it's always snowballing in a certain way. You know, so if you let the negativity kind of affect you and keep picking up, sometimes it puts you on that trajectory. And I think as a general sense of anything, you have to be concertedly positive.
Sure.
Because negative is kind of status quo. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to try to be negative.
Well, you know, the thing about
you have to try to be positive in the face of things that make you want to be negative.
If you're living and only recognizing the negative aspects of life, that is going to suck you in and glue you to that, right?
Yeah.
Like if you can't see the sun, then it's just gloomy, right? Like you have to strive for positivity. It doesn't mean it's always going to be there.
Right.
But if you're not always reaching for the sun, you're just going to live in darkness, and that darkness is going to weigh on your experience.
You would have been good in them therapy groups, Tony. Them kids, they would have fucking listened to you.
I've been
in
so many therapy groups.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Just because of I've been in the situation where you were probably overseeing.
Yep.
Right. From anger management to group therapy to all of that. I've been
CBT, DBT.
And you're right. There. You know, where I'm at presently and where I'm going with my life and my creative inspiration is in a path of servitude, and that includes kids that come from the harder situations, because I've I don't want to say pulled myself out of it, but I understand what they're going through and I can relate to it.
Yeah,
and
for
so
sure.
Those are directions I'm definitely working toward.
For sure. I think that's a good point, and I think, you know, I mean it when I think that you would be good at that, and I think there's things that we have from that experience of the, you know, the counterculture of growing up and our experiences growing up. Mm-hmm. That's our advantage in that realm, in that field of, you know, especially specifically like adolescent psychology, because
what is really interesting about us, specifically our age demographic, is we're the last generation that existed while it was quiet.
Yo, I think about that all the time.
Experienced what it was
all
like.
The time. I watched Captain Ron last night. Mm-hmm. Remember that movie with the fucking
yeah.
And like the beginning of the movie, she's on a phone in her kitchen on a business call, but it's attached to the wall.
Yeah.
You got that long ass cord, you know. You can shoot in the other room with the cord. Still got a fucking cord.
So when you check out for the day, no one can get you because your phone isn't with you,
Right.
right? There is no internet, right? But then as we grew and progressed, right, those things came into our world. So like we still know how to get to that quiet place, but we also understand the impediment of so much communication and technology being shoved down our throat.
Yeah.
And so when we talk to other people, like we're the connecting factor in a sense, right? And it's important that we recognize that and share that wisdom with people like people that are younger than us, because they don't know what that world looks like. They don't know what.
That's what I was gonna say. It's wild to think that they don't even know if it exists.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean,
but I was also
there's places in the world, but for the most part, no.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Here, you know, and I'm referring specifically to this trash bag country right now. But yeah, I was referring more specifically I think that, you know, that's part of it. Like our superpower is that, you know, kids don't think you're full of shit right away, basically.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you know better than anybody. Like when you're have an adult that's supposed to be in a position of trust, you have about 15 seconds whether you decide as a teenager what the fuck you're gonna tell that person. You know what I mean?
And in most cases,
and in most cases, you're like, fuck this person.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Get out of here.
Like that's why I think I stayed so long in that you know profession, is because I had like that je ne sais quoi, that fucking listen, kid, I'm not here to fucking bullshit you.
I remember I was
you know?
I was in where was I? I was in the DYS, like a juvenile facility in Grand Junction. And they had some sheriff or somebody come talk to us, and he's trying to be relatable to our world.
Respectfully.
Right? And he was like, I got problems too. I have to go and paint my fence, and like went on this whole tangent about what that looked like. And meanwhile, you know, there's kids that have been molested, beat, shot, stabbed, all the things in that little group that's talking to him.
Right.
And he's telling us he's trying to tell us about his fence, and we're just like, he lost us. He didn't even get to 15 seconds.
Yeah.
He walked in and we're like, no.
Nope.
We're not even listening, bro.
Probably should have just thrown some sweatpants on if you were trying to try in the first place. Yeah, to get the fuck out of here.
But anyway, so you're in the hospital for 9 years, you know, doing the psych patient stuff.
Yeah.
And then and this kind of came out of nowhere for me, like knowing you but not knowing you on a day-to-day basis. It seems like you took a plunge into something for you, right? And that was the creative stuff. So
yeah.
What was the antithesis for you to make a career change? And then why the specific thing that you chose to do, which is tattooing now?
Well, you know, it's funny because a lot of people were always like, man, you should be a tattoo artist. And you should, you know, because a lot of my friends were in Denver growing up. You know, I kind of grew up in that scene. That's, I think, very integrated into what the stuff that we were talking about. Yeah. And I loved it. I always looked up to tattoo artists, you know. I think Bobby Tyrell said something.
There's like a rock star quality to that.
There is, and that's it, you know. And I don't know if you know who Bob Tyrell is. He's like a rock star fucking tattoo artist guy, but he's like, and another guy said it too, but it was, you know, we're the people that, and I'm not referring, I'm quoting.
Yeah.
But he's saying we're the people that the rock stars look up to, you know, and for them that's absolutely true, you know, and especially from that era. Which was, you know, I think he's probably referring to the fucking 80s and 90s, you know what I mean? But that kind of stuck with me too, as like, wow, that's kind of a cool thing to say. And I think that's where that started, but I think it's kind of the opposite now, where the coolest people that I think in tattooing are the most humble. And, you know what I mean?
But let's get back to you. So what led you from, you know, wanting to be a snowboarder to then becoming a psych major and working in the psychology industry in hospitals and whatnot?
Yeah,
so
the hospital for me,
what? I'm gonna go tattoo people.
Right, and that was a process, you know, and I think it had a lot to do with, you know, when you work at Children's Hospital, a lot of people want to work there, you know, maybe with good intentions, but they really want to look good on paper, you know, and they don't have 2 years residential experience, you know, and they just hire these kids out of college and put them on a locked psych unit. And that's just a recipe for disaster, you know what I mean? And they've been doing that for years, and I kind of, you know, held on, and there was people that, So that, I mean, I think that kind of ran its course. with like several incidents where you just felt like unappreciated.
Yeah, I mean,
know?
or even just the emotional toll of losing a patient.
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
you know,
So that
just-
all kind of came together, and then, I think the catalyst, like politically, everything is kind of crazy, and I'm just like, if the world's crazy, I'm gonna kind of try to just do what I want to do and follow my passion, and a lot of my friends have been doing it, and it was in the time where the gate was open by Amazon, because that gate had been kept by so many tattoo artists for so long.
Yeah.
Which respectfully, I
You
still
had to
wanted
go
to go the
apprentice
route. I wanted to do it right and apprentice and do the, process. But it was at a time and where it is anybody can get anything they want. So I really just kind of focused on the art at the time, and that's kind of when the world shut down, and I kind of dove
It got
myself.
quiet again.
It got quiet, right? And it came naturally to me to just do art, because when it was quiet, that's what I did. That's what I was into. It's funny. I told somebody else, I'm like, I thanked my mom for grounding me so much back in the day, because all the things that I do now are things that I just used to do in my room, like all the
When
things
you were
that I like.
grounded.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. What you choose to do with your free time.
My daughter, she's super into anime, like a lot of kids are at
Hell
this
yeah.
juncture. But like, I love watching her. She'll disappear, and when you find her, she's somewhere with a pad and a pen,
hell
or color pencils, or right now she's on this watercolor kick. And when I say hours, I mean
Right.
she'll devote the lion's share of her non-active waking time to just creating.
Hell yeah.
And it's everything from like anime comic book stuff to realism stuff to like, she just does it and you don't have to tell her, like she just, yeah.
Right.
It's pretty dope.
And that's cool, man.
Yeah.
And that's
Just a nod to like your mom and the grounded thing.
Yeah, right. Like I think about, somebody was talking about creativity and the process of it, and like the people that are creative, like we have to create. Like it's if we don't, there's something missing from us,
So you go to, through Amazon, through some of the traditional apprentice stuff, you end up,
I went the traditional route of it,
you end up finding your way to tattooing.
Yeah.
What's that like the first time you sit down with the person and you're tattooing that stick figure on them? Because
It's the best. For lack of a better term, it's like, if we're talking about
I'm talking about the first tattoo that you ever did
that I ever did
as a professional. Like you've done your
like-
mishaps. You're
like
sitting
post
down.
apprenticeship.
Sure.
It's it's kind of crazy because it's and I don't know what the specific delineation for that would be, like the first person that I charged or whatever, but it's not so much like a very
What I mean is like
stark line, but I think the first tattoos that I was proud of
okay.
were on some of the people that let me do shitty tattoos on them to
Yeah,
learn.
because they
You
were
know?
encouraging your craft.
Yeah. Shout out fucking like, Dallas and Neverlow's got a lot of mine. Those people are invaluable to me.
Yeah.
And I was that person to a lot of my homies when they were learning. You know what I mean? And that's why.
So how many years as a professional tattoo artist do you have now? And I'm
As a
leading up to something.
Professional, I would say like almost 4.
Almost 4 years.
Yeah. That's, again, where do you start the line? But
Yeah.
I'd say that's fine.
That's great. So as a professional tattoo artist, what I'm wondering, and I think I know the answer, some of your psych experience and wisdom giving and just interaction with the world, have you seen it also unveil itself while you're tattooing people?
I mean, I think those things are all super related. Bartending, counseling,
Barbers. Yeah, there's certain things like
you're connecting with one person.
and that and often that one person has seen a lot of different aspects of life through the craft that they've chose.
That's my favorite part, because I was gonna say, like, looking at the psychology wise, it's like, that's called a one-to-one patient. That patient gets one person, you know what I mean? And in the psych world, that's a nightmare. Because if you require your own specific staff member, that means you're fucking, you're a risk. There's a something that needs to be watched by one person, And we didn't have any medical thing. You had to be medically cleared to be on our floor, so that it was something wild. You know what I mean? Usually, but opposite for tattooing. I get to have a one-on-one with fucking the process that I love, create art in the way that I love, and I've been super blessed with like the coolest people that want to come get tattoos. You know?
And you get to listen to their story.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Interact with their story.
For sure, and it's like the coolest part. You know, that just lights me up. You know what I mean?
You know,
getting to do that, getting to go collaborate and listen to people.
Something that just came to mind that I know a lot of people get tattooed for this reason, and you having experience in both fields, but like the idea of tattoo therapy.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of like therapy groups we used to run, and you know, the kids would be like, "Well, tattoos are self-harm," and I'm like, "No, that's art."
No.
And I always think of the one thing that's, you know, I used to do adolescents mostly, but sometimes they would put me with the kids, and I think some of the most poignant things that I have as far as like therapeutic sayings and things are things that I had to boil down for the kids from the adolescents.
Yeah.
Like simplify it, you know? But
increase the potency with less.
Yeah, I had to try to make the kids understand it, but have the same meaning. But you know, there's one thing, and it's how you describe progressive muscle relaxation therapy to kids, and they call it rocks and socks, right? You're like hard as a rock, and then you're floppy like a sock, right?
Yeah.
And that's an actual thing that they do, you know, progressive muscle relaxation, and that's, I think, what tattooing is.
Yeah.
You know, if you think about it, it's involuntary. Like you tense up when you're getting tattooed, and then you relax. And you tense up.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of things, even, you know, the adrenaline of smelling green soap.
Yeah.
If you have enough tattoos. It's just, it changes your, you know, so.
Well, and I think there's just an openness. There's this rock star-esque, you know, free-spirited person in the driver's seat, and as a customer, you're saving up for this moment, and you get to kind of release or unload on the moment with that person. You get to talk with them, and
it's all about it's about the art.
Yeah,
you know,
it's always
I think the thing lately that's the coolest that I've been thinking about is like I'm thinking of getting tattoos from artists that I love.
Yeah.
And I like it. The process doesn't change for me. Like I have to fill out a thing, and I gotta put in my idea.
Everybody goes.
But like knowing that I know that they want something specific and in their style, and you know, and it's like it's streamlined for me, but it's still a fun process to like do.
What's next for you as an artist?
Well, I'm working on some big acrylic paintings right now for some of my musician friends who are on a sold out arena tour right now. But we can't, that's all we can say.
Oh yeah.
But I'm trying to parlay the music side of it, I think.
Yeah.
I would like to, you know, I got a taste of kind of, you know, tattooing people backstage at shows and doing stuff like that. And I think that would be a really cool aspect to go to. You know what I mean? I like that environment, and I want to be there in a professional sense and not, you know, a drunken fan.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, this is my guy Mike, aka Mike Fridge.
Let's go.
Creative Questions Podcast. I appreciate you coming.
Thank you so much for having me, man.
Hell yeah, let's go.
Hell yeah. See ya.